NC pork, good for the plate, great for the state. Welcome into Timeout here on the North Carolina Sports Network, presented by the North Carolina Pork Council. I am Mike Waddell, coming to you from the C-Suite. David Glenn is coming to us from Press Row, and Coach Kerry Keating from the sideline. And here's the board in this state. Duke, 77-51. They clinch the ACC title, and the number one seed is locked, and they come back and they destroy Will Wade and the Wolfpack over at the Lenovo Center on Monday night, 93-64. Zone look early, Avalanche late. North Carolina as well comes through with two big wins. They get the best of the Hokies, 89-82. Veesaar, 26 points. Powell, 15. Trimble, 20. And then Carolina on Tuesday night owns Clemson late in the game. This one was nip and tuck, but 67-63 is the final score there, with Carolina on the road in Durham. Next up, Virginia also bump up to 26-4 with their 75-70 win over Wake Forest. David Glenn, in one thought, what's the biggest story in North Carolina basketball right now?
Well, man, Mike, it's extra fun to be with you and Coach, because that's a long list to choose from. But my short answer would be the number one team in the nation is the Duke Blue Devils. And the handing of the baton from Mike Krzyzewski to John Scheyer has gone smoothly and continues to go smoothly. And even though the Blue Devils lost all 5 starters from a Final Four team to the NBA, where they are playing right now, they rebuilt, and they have found another National Player of the Year in Cameron Boozer. So we have a lot of other stories here. Tar Heels, Wolfpack, even beyond the ACC. I think we have a great chance at some conference champions. But it's been a while since Duke won an NCAA title. It's been a while since the ACC won an NCAA title. And this year's Blue Devils have a great chance of ending both of those streaks here over the next month.
Keats, what's your money story coming into the last week of the regular season?
Put the money on the Blue Devils, as David said there. I wouldn't know if they're a clear number one, because I think Arizona is pretty formidable, and obviously Michigan has shown some prowess as well. I do think that Duke would be even bigger story had it not been for Seth Trimble and a late 3 in the Dean Dome, and then a 1-point loss to Texas Tech, and we'd be talking about them as the other undefeated team with a chance to potentially go undefeated for the whole table, right? To go all the way through the Final Four in the national championship game. It's a real offensive juggernaut with defensive chops right now. They can outscore you in the 90s. They can beat you in the 60s. That's a recipe for a team that's going to win a lot of games, potentially 6 come the beginning of April. I think a lot of people around here are going to be happy, if you're ACC fans, to see some great representation from the Blue Devils coming up the NCAA tournament here soon.
Let's move on to our first half. It's presented by Amedio's Italian Restaurant and Sammy's Tap and Grill, 2 Raleigh originals where March talk goes year round. And a quick tease, closer to the Final Four, David Glenn and Tim Peeler will interview David Thompson and Phil Ford in a special combined edition of This Was Then and the David Glenn Show coming up. So be sure to get over to Amedio's, get over to Sammy's, watch some basketball, and stay tuned for our special announcements. Now, to Duke and State. This one will not take a lot of time. Now, Duke, they made 2 big statements this past week, guys. 77-51 over Virginia to clinch the ACC regular season crown and that number 1 seed in Charlotte. Then 93-64 at NC State. Duke red hot, 55% from the floor, 40% from behind the arc, and they racked up 21 assists. State tried the zone, went 3-2, tried that physicality with Big Vin Allen Lubin, but Duke adjusted, got their paint touches, and the margin exploded. 1T subplot, fellas. Dame Sarr gave Duke real offense, and that is bad news for opponents of the Blue Devils. 16 points, 14 in the first half. Coach Keating, what was the one adjustment that Duke has been making that has been making them better and better as this season has gone on?
Well, I think you hit it nail on the head there. You're seeing a different look that's not very common when you're playing against a team like Duke. It was a gamble, by Coach Wade to play some zone against them, but Duke is just, too good of a team, too talented of a team, too smart of a team. And I think you heard Will say after the game how impressive an operation it is. He got to see it on film, but he saw it up close. He even commented about how they sprint to the scorer's table during timeouts. I mean, I think John's got these guys well oiled as far as the zone goes, attacking the zone in the weak spots. I mean, the easy way out of a zone is they hope they miss shots, right? Like you pack it in and you hope that they miss outside shots. As you mentioned, statistically, not the case. But when you're able to pass and catch freely, get open looks, move the ball around, get through the middle of the zone and collapse it in a traditional sense, attack short corners. And the one thing about Boozer, as talented as he is on the offensive end, I know we've brought this up because he's seen a multitude of double teams, but he's the type of guy that's going to thrive against his own because he can really pass the ball. I mean, he is the most complete player in the country. I know DG has been championing him as the player of the year now for weeks, and he's making DG look really good because there is no sign of that possibly not happening at this stage. I think he's almost got that thing wrapped up as time passes here. But Duke clearly is a team that you have to throw the kitchen sink at, and really, if they don't let you play with six guys, you're not going to have much of a chance against them.
DG, what does Duke's ability to win in totally different ways tell you about their March Madness ceiling?
Well, we know their March Madness ceiling would be winning the NCAA tournament on top of it to give John Scheyer his first title after coming somewhat close a year ago with Cooper Flagg and Con Knipple and that group. But one thing that's happening here, number one, Duke is one of only 3 or 4 teams in the country that is both top 10 offensive efficiency and top 10 defensive efficiency. For a long time, that has been at least an indicator of the teams with the best chance to cut down the nets in early April. Michigan's on that list, Arizona's on that list, and Florida is kind of right on the cusp of that list. But Mike, it's easy to forget that right after the turn of the calendar year, Duke went to Florida State and beat the Seminoles, who are not even an NCAA tournament contender, by only 4 points. It was Devils 91, Seminoles 87. That was, a little less than 2 months ago. Think of how much better the Devils have gotten in that 2-month period. And it's a credit to John Scheyer and his staff. He might be the ACC Coach of the Year. He might be National Coach of the Year. But it's also a credit to those players. Caleb Foster's a better version of himself at point guard. Dame Sarr, you brought up earlier, is the occasional double-digit scorer to go with that brilliant defense. Pat Gongba is a part of some of the best defensive lineups in all of college basketball this year. We know what Cameron Boozer is. I think no doubt about it, National Player of the Year. I actually have a ballot due this weekend for Player of the Year, and Cam Boozer's name is going to be on it. But to go from barely beating Florida State in Tallahassee, a kind of NIT type team maybe, to absolutely destroying Louisville, a good team, 83-52, absolutely destroying everybody else on their schedule since early January, except for that loss in Chapel Hill to the Tar Heels. They murdered the Virginia Cavaliers, 77-51. They went to NC State and embarrassed the Wolfpack, as you said, 93-64. When you're well coached, great on offense, great on defense, have plenty of star power, they're not perfect. Sometimes they get average point guard play. Sometimes Isaiah Evans is a little cold from three-point land. Evans has gotten better down the stretch. One more example of individual and collective improvement for the Blue Devils. So the ceiling is the roof, as Michael Jordan might say in a different context. There is no guarantees in this sport. Obviously, that's why we call it March Madness. But the Blue Devils, to me, are the favorite, of course, to win the ACC title. And if not the favorite to win the whole thing, they're right there neck and neck with Arizona, as Coach said, as the 2 favorites to win it all.
When you look at Duke last year to this year, a lot of people are going to make that comparison. If this team wins the national championship, now we're moving way ahead. We're jumping 6 weeks in the advance to the Final Four. But would that mean that this year's team is more talented than last year's team, or does it just mean that this year's team came together at the right time and at the right place to get the right wins?
Well, timing is everything. I think you can make an argument that Cam Boozer may be more efficient for this team than Cooper Flagg was for last year's team. Only now up to this point because the results to this point have been just a tad bit better. But it remains to be seen. I mean, I think the judge of that's going to be how many games Cam's able to help the team win in the NCAA tournament as opposed to Cooper falling short. But this isn't a one-man show. I mean, this is an embarrassment of riches that doesn't really just reloads. I mean, it's not even a rebuild, and that's not even really the case in college basketball anymore on a year-to-year basis for everybody. But Duke has kind of quietly, and I say quietly because there hasn't been a lot of talk about the amount of money that they're spending on their roster. That's been the quiet part that's been speaking the loudest. There's been plenty of talk about Kentucky's roster costing $20 million and Texas Tech have an embarrassment of riches that they're spending down in West Texas, and what other teams are doing to spend, St. John's, what they're doing. There's been more financial talk of the other elite teams and less financial talk about Duke's team, but more result-oriented talk about them. But let's not get it twisted. They put some effort and money to this. No one really talked. We didn't even talk about this last year, about how much money Cooper Flagg was able to garner while at Duke last year. It was a lot. I don't know exactly what the number was in the end, but they go about their business. And I bring back the point that Will Wade brought up. I think John and his staff have really taken advantage of the leap that they had early on to set up a staff. And remember, they had some front office staff in place before anybody else did, and now it's par for the course for everybody. I think that advantage that they got early on in the transition from Coach K into John Scheyer, not on the court, but the off the court stuff, has really elevated them. And I think you're seeing the result of that now. Were they prepared to do that last year? Yeah, Con Knipple and Cooper Flagg had all pretty dang good, and obviously showing they can play at a really high level in the greatest league in the universe right now in the NBA. This team may be better, and I think that's a direct result of the path that they've had since day one in John Shirer's regime.
Yeah, this is not a more talented Duke team. It's just not, right? Caleb Foster is not going to be a high NBA draft pick. Just to pick one example, Pat Gongba is not going to be drafted as high whenever he goes pro as Kaman Malawach was a year ago. Cameron Boozer is almost everything that Cooper Flagg was, and there might be a couple things that he does even better than Flagg did. Again, it's not a perfect team, but maybe John Scheyer learned some lessons. It's not as if that Duke team of a year ago was not one of the best in the country. It was. It's not as if the Duke team of a year ago could not have won the national championship. They were right there knocking on the door at the Final Four with the lead in the semifinals and should have played in the championship game before letting it get away. Maybe John Scheyer learned something from that experience. Maybe they have used that as offseason motivation. But this is, I think, an even more impressive coaching job by John Scheyer this year than what he did last year. And remember, last year, whereas Pat Kelsey of Louisville was the ACC Coach of the Year, John Scheyer did win. There's a handful of organizations that give out a National Coach of the Year award. Scheyer won one or two of those. I believe the McClendon Award was one of them. So to go from that in his third year to this in his fourth year is as smooth a coaching transition you'll ever see from a legend to his successor. You know that famous quote in coaching circles is, you never want to be the guy to follow the guy, in capital letters. Well, John Scheyer's been the guy to follow the guy, and he's doing quite nicely, and this may be his most special season yet.
Every great team has a winning playbook, and every great meal, it starts with North Carolina pork. Bacon for the early tip breakfast, pulled pork at the arena. That's how you win the day. Behind every bite, NC pig farmers fuel more than $10 billion in economic impact statewide. Great teams execute. Great meals deliver. North Carolina pork. Game on, grill on. Learn more at ncpork.org.
When their service is over, our veterans may have a new career and life to manage. We're here to help, providing more than $1 million a year in career-building scholarship funds and discounts on every haircut for veterans. Sport Clips Haircuts, supporting veterans everywhere.
Time now for our second half. It's presented by the King Neptune Restaurant. Chef Nick is back with a refreshed spring menu. The world-class tuna tacos are back. Pastry chef MB is making homemade donuts now. They are outstanding. I had them earlier this week. And pasta at King Neptune is now being made in-house. It is the place to be. Go down to Wrightsville Beach. Check out King Neptune Restaurant. Keating Gillespie running one of the greatest restaurants in all of the bold North State. Let's talk some Tar Heel basketball for you right here. Big win over the weekend, 89-82 over Virginia Tech. But Tuesday night, they complete an 18-0 Smith Center season. The Tar Heels, 67-63 winners over Clemson, breaking a 2-game win streak for the Tigers in this series. Carolina survived a brutal shooting night by winning the last 4 minutes with defense, rebounds, and free throws, holding Clemson scoreless for a key 3-minute and 27-second stretch and closing it late with Dixon's dagger 3 and Bogovac at the line. David, this one was a grinder. RJ Godfrey for the Tigers went nuclear, 21 points, 10 of 12 shooting, and Carolina was under 35% overall until late. But what does this win tell you about Hubert Davis's team's toughness and NCAA ceiling?
The game against Clemson showed that the Tar Heels had physical toughness when they needed it. I think this team has had emotional and mental toughness pretty much all season long. They've shown a lot of resiliency through a lot of adversity, so that wasn't a question to me. But that UNC Clemson game kind of turned into a football game. And someone who, remember, we discussed here on Time Out, had trouble with the physicality of the American college game, Luka Bogovac, a transplant from Montenegro, who was one of the top scorers in the Adriatic League last year. Same guy, 22 years old, so he's a young man at this point. He's learned. He's gotten better. And in a Clemson game that looked like it could have been played on that green field instead of a hard court at the Smith Center, he didn't seem bothered. He played physically, defensively. He moved without the ball offensively. He took some tough three-pointers and made them when the Tar Heels needed it. But let me give you one quick thing, because you asked about Carolina's ceiling. UNC's game against Clemson completed Carolina's 40th season at the Smith Center, all right? This Tar Heel team, you mentioned, finished 18-0 at the Smith Center. There were only 5 previous UNC basketball teams that finished undefeated at the Smith Center. 5 in 40 years prior to this season. 3 of those 5 won the NCAA title. Dean Smith's 1993 Tar Heels went undefeated in the building that bears his name and then cut down the nets in New Orleans. In 2005 and 2017, Roy Williams' squads went undefeated at the Smith Center, went on to win the NCAA title in each of those 2 years. The only other 2 teams at Carolina prior to this year that specifically went unbeaten at home after the Heels moved into the Smith Center, obviously in 1986, they both went to the Elite Eight. So Carolina's 2026 team just matched what 5 of their predecessors did, and then those 5 teams were varying degrees of spectacular come what matters most, the NCAA tournament. But Mike, this is a theme, not just the home court thing, which is either going to be some prescient trivia about where these Tar Heels can go from here. Remember, when they lost Seth Trimble, their 3rd best player for a long time, they didn't panic. They kept winning. When they had that disastrous trip to the West Coast, losing to middle-of-the-road Stanford and Cal back-to-back, they didn't panic. They didn't point fingers. They didn't have locker room chemistry problems. They bounced back and won 5 straight, including at Virginia and over Duke, which is now the #1 team in the nation. They lose Caleb Wilson. Yeah, they had the ugly loss at NC State without both Wilson and Henri Veesaar, but what have they done since then? 4 straight victories, including over a really good Louisville team, a desperate Virginia Tech team, and then the Clemson game. The Tigers are an NCAA tournament team again this year. That's a lot of bouncing back from adversity. That's a lot of fiber and backbone that's been shown by Hubert Davis's club. And I don't think if there's a healthy connection between coach and player, if there's not healthy chemistry in that locker room, I don't think you bounce back 4 different times, 4 different ways from 4 different crises. So Hubert Davis is not going to win the ACC Coach of the Year award, obviously. There's several others who have done even better jobs, perhaps. But it's been a good job by Hubert Davis. It's been consistent willingness to fight through adversity for this group of Tar Heels. And when they get Caleb Wilson back, I think this group is going to be really, really tough to beat, even if they don't match what those 3 other undefeated at home Smith Center teams were able to do during March Madness.
David, a quick follow-up to that. Late in this game, in the last minute, Veesaar fouls out. Now, when Caleb Wilson comes back, he's going to go out and try to do a lot of stuff, but the coaches will probably tell him to kind of measure himself, to pace his game as he comes back and tries to get into the flow. Carolina can't afford, when they're playing up against Duke, if they play the Blue Devils again, to have one of those 2 guys not be at their optimum best. How big of a challenge is that for Hubert Davis to keep his 2 big guys playing within themselves and in the best way for the team?
Well, it's essential to what they do because Caleb Wilson's a first-team All-ACC player, and if he doesn't make it, Henri Veesaar is a second-team All-ACC player. This is a team driven by its front court. Its backcourt has been up and down at times. Seth Trimble has stepped forward. Luka Bogovac against Clemson and others stepped forward. So maybe the backcourt is kind of catching up. But the Heels have a high ceiling because of Caleb Wilson plus Henri Veesaar. You can tell when either the Heels are missing Wilson, they struggle in various ways. When Veesaar is in foul trouble, or even when he goes to the bench, they can struggle in various ways. There have been a lot of games this year, Mike, where Veesaar is in the neighborhood of plus 16, plus 20, plus 24. What does that mean? It means when he's on the court, the Heels are outscoring their opponent by 20 or 24 points. A lot of those same games when Veesaar gets a breather or has foul trouble, the Heels are being outscored by double digits. So make no mistake about it. There's this 1-2 punch in the front court that is, I think, one of the best front court tandems in the entire country. I think Veesaar has been that good alongside the All-American Caleb Wilson. Would it be good enough at Duke if Caleb Wilson came back for that game, as some are suggesting? Probably not, to be candid. But would it be good enough the rest of the way? Would it make the Heels a threat in Charlotte at the ACC tournament? Would it make them a candidate to go to the Sweet 16 and beyond in the NCAA tournament? Heck yeah, because without either Wilson or Veesaar playing at full strength, the Heels are a good team, but they're nothing close to a great team.
Coach Kerry Keating, let's break out your dry erase board and go inside the last 8 minutes of this game tonight between Carolina and Clemson, because with that 8-minute timeout, Clemson is up 50-49, and Carolina's offense is dead stuck in the mud. But the Heels string together a 3-minute and 27-second scoreless stretch defensively. What did you see schematically and emotionally that allowed Carolina to win this game without shooting the rock very well?
Well, it's a great point, and it obviously stood out tonight in a game that was historical in nature, given it the fact that it led to an undefeated season, as he talked about early on. But I think what it's now brought to full circle as we go into their last regular season game with Duke is 2 things that stand out to me, and especially as David has pointed out with their front court, and even though Wilson has been out, the body of work in this has led to some pretty interesting stats, in that they're 3rd in the country in defensive free throw rate, right behind Duke and Illinois, which means they're not fouling. So they have big guys that are protecting, and they also have some defenders on the perimeter that are not fouling. And the other interesting stat that has kind of become a little bit more noticeable and readily available in this age of analytics is average 2-point attempted distance. They're 4th in the country at that. So I'll break that down in layman's terms. They're not giving up shots at the rim, and obviously that's because of the size that they have in the front court. But they're also forcing shots in that dreaded mid-range zone or less. It's not even a mid-range. 7.5 feet away from the basket is their average opponent's shot from 2. It's really interesting when you think about that, because you wouldn't think as Carolina right now as a defensive juggernaut. But things that lead to possibilities like tonight when their offense is kind of stalled and Caleb Wilson is in street clothes, they're kind of able to hang their hat on the fact that two things are happening there. Because if you flip this around, Mike, from a coaching standpoint, and we all love to give Brad Brownell a lot of credit, but it's really hard to get your offense going when shots aren't falling. The easiest way you tell kids is get to the free throw line. The clock will stop if you're trying to get back in the game, and it's points on the board while the clock is stopped. And it's the highest percentage shot in the game. The free throw is, because it's undefended, it's the same every time, and it's usually made somewhere at a 70% clip. You can't get there versus Carolina. They've proven that now over the course of the year. This may actually travel with them from a defensive standpoint in a very difficult second or possibly third round NCAA game. Can it get them to a Final Four? Not quite sure about that because the totality of their defense may not match up to those stats. But in key moments, like you pointed out tonight, Mike, when their offense is kind of stalled or they don't really have it going from one way or the other, the defense is going to carry the day. And when you're not fouling your opponents and they're shooting twos from 7.5 feet away from the basket and you're rebounding at a fairly good clip, yes, it may help some transition. But if the other team's not scoring, you can always stay in the game. And I think that kind of got highlighted tonight. And when you step back and look at their resume, it's kind of something that I don't think a lot of people are going to talk about, but it's certainly something they can hang their hat on in the first weekend of the NCAA tournament.
Okay, so late in this game between Carolina and Clemson, we've got this text chain going on. Coach Keating, David Glenn, and me. We're just sitting there going back and Keats, you say, here comes the three. And I think the entire world.
I jinxed it.
Yeah, everybody thought Brad Brownell was going to draw up the three, but he didn't. And take us through that final sequence, because Stevenson's huge offensive rebound, then Derek Dixon's three that made it 64-69. We thought it was going to be a three, but it wasn't. What happened right there? Was that just a massive misfire for the Tigers out on the court?
I'm always kind of up in arms and always taught this and made sure that we adhered to this if we got into this situation where we were playing. Kids always think there's a hero shot and they automatically equate threes more than two, and I can make this and it get us back in the game quicker. When in reality, when you're trying to come back, and I'm using this in totality first, when you're just trying to score 2-3 possessions down, get the clock stopped. Now, it's a little different for some kids in high school because the clock doesn't stop. They got to make that adjustment into college when the clock stops under a minute. But I always thought you get the fastest basket you could. You didn't necessarily have to call timeout, but put points on the board and then play the percentages and hopefully foul the right guys, and then don't give up any free throw rebounds. Now, that said, they did do a good job the possession prior and got a really good quick two at the basket. And then I think Stevenson went down and missed the free throw. So they put themselves in a position to stay within one. Of course, didn't work out for them, and Bogovac hit the free throws late. But what makes this even more egregious, guys, is that this is out of a timeout. Out of a timeout, and your point guard has the ball, and you had less than 9 seconds. If you don't get that layup in the first 3, 4, 5 seconds, because listen, you can go length of the court and score a layup, or even get, for that matter, a pretty good look at a three, anywhere from 3 to 5 seconds full court. Whether it's off a pass or not. And every action's a second, but with the speed and the advancement. So you could theoretically, under 9, get a really quick two. I think if that was what Brad was looking for, the ball would have been entered closer to the basket. Now, keep in mind, they probably got away with a 5-second call there. That was a pretty slow road count there. I thought for sure it was going to be a 5-second count. Be that as it may, you can't go in and take a layup under 2 seconds when you're down by 3 and hope that they either foul you or that you're going to get a steal and another basket that quickly. So I don't know if it was a mental breakdown or a brain fart. It just blows my mind coming out of a timeout that and as good as the Clemson coaches are and as good as the team has been and cerebral as you think they are, that they pretty much took all the chance they had to win that game right out of their own hands.
The strangest part about it was that Dylan Hunter is a senior guard for the Clemson Tigers. Yeah. And there was a timeout with 10 seconds to go. And of course, you can go for the very quick two if you want to.
Yep.
If it's not really quick, Dylan Hunter's job is to drive and kick, period. There's no doubt about it. There's no two ways about it. It's not unusual for a person to melt down late in a close game at the Smith Center or at any other hostile environment. It is unusual for it to be your senior point guard in an era where there's only 3 fourth-year seniors at the 18 ACC schools combined that signed with the same school, stayed all 4 years, and are finishing at the same school. One was Seth Trimble in that game being honored by Carolina on his senior night, and then the other was Dylan Hunter of the Clemson Tigers. So I didn't hear, we started this show during the coach's comments, so I didn't hear the rest of the explanation for what happened. But that was an extremely ill-timed meltdown mentally for a team that's most famous for great defense and smart basketball this year under Brad Brownell.
Some places don't need hype. They already are the hype. Jimmy's at Wrightsville Beach is one of those places. Live music, classic surf bar vibe, and the kind of energy where you walk in knowing you're about to see someone you know, or meet someone you will. Great drinks, great people, and yeah, Cruiser and Cash, the Black Labs, usually hanging by the door or posted up near the bar like they own the place. Which, honestly, they kinda do. You come by to say what's up to a few friends. You catch one song, then another, and next thing you know, it's way later than you planned, but you're exactly where you want to be. If you're looking for a place that feels like Wrightsville Beach has always felt, Jimmy's is waiting. Jimmy's at Wrightsville Beach, the bar for everybody, down on WB. Live music, 365 days a year. Jimmy's, proud supporters of the beach life and the North Carolina Sports Network.
Michael Berard, Managing Director Investments with the Founders Group at Stifel, works with a select group of high net worth individuals and institutions to develop and implement investment plans tailored to their specific objectives and risk tolerances. If you are interested in highly personalized, well-researched guidance and outstanding personal service, you can contact Michael at 984-364-2002. That's 984-364-2002. Stifel Nicholas and Company Incorporated, member SIPC and NYSE.
Well, let's move on now to the game that everybody's thinking about, and that's Duke and Carolina on Saturday night in Cameron. And Duke playing like the standard. Carolina has been scoring, and they've been confident, even without Caleb Wilson. But Saturday, it's about travel, rebounding in a hostile building, handling runs, and executing when that Cameron crazy influence is pretty special and intense. David, what's the single biggest key for Carolina to get that rare win at Cameron?
Well, I'd start with being strong with the ball offensively. This Duke defense is number one in the nation. They have long-armed athletes everywhere. The shortest guy on the court is 6'5". They fill passing lanes, and they want to disrupt you offensively. NC State's a pretty good offensive basketball team, and Duke embarrassed the Wolfpack in front of the fans at the Lenovo Center by taking them entirely out of what they wanted to do offensively and sometimes causing the Pack's players to lose their composure along the way. Carolina, from all 5 positions, has to be strong with the ball. What does that mean? Expect contact. Expect not all contact, sometimes even strong contact. Expect it often to not be called. Expect a lot of noise. Expect a lot of personal insults from the Cameron crazies. Don't expect the guys in the zebra suits to be your friends as a road team in Cameron Indoor Stadium. Duke is mad about what happened in Chapel Hill. And Duke, John Scheyer, I'm sure, is telling the Blue Devils that if they played their number one in the nation defense for all 40 minutes in Chapel Hill, they wouldn't have lost that game on Seth Trimble's last-second three-pointer. Carolina had only 7 turnovers in that game in Chapel Hill when they were beating Duke. That is brutally difficult to do against this Duke team. I can't imagine that number will be that low again, but that is the starting point if Carolina is going to have any chance at pulling off the sweep of the Blue Devils.
Duke's won 3 out of the last 4 against the Tar Heels, DG. Is this game more about seeding or more about proving that you can beat Duke in Duke's exact environment? Or, like you said, is this just the time for Duke just like they've done to Virginia, just like they've done to NC State, to open up a big blue can of whoop ass on the Tar Heels?
Well, this is a little bit of a deeper dive, but I'll say this. From Carolina's perspective, the NCAA tournament, I know this is the greatest rivalry on earth, and I subscribe to that theory, but from Carolina's perspective, I think their road in the NCAA tournament would be infinitely less complicated if they could somehow get to a 3-seed line. If you're a 4 or a 5 seed and you make it to the Sweet 16, you're stuck with dealing most likely with one of those number 1 seeds in the round of 16. Good luck with that. And that's not an insult to the Tar Heels. I would say good luck with that to anybody facing Duke or Arizona or Michigan or maybe Florida. We'll see. Could you imagine if either the Heels swept the Blue Devils, or maybe the Heels lose in Durham but somehow figure out a way to win the ACC tournament? I don't know if that would get them into the top 12 nationally, which is what you would need to be a 3 seed. But, man, the Tar Heels as a 3 seed would be a fascinating story to watch during March Madness, where, again, as the 4 and 5 seed, they'd still be a tough out. They'd still be fun to watch. They'd still be a great story for the reasons we've already discussed, fighting through adversity, etc., the brilliance of Caleb Wilson when he's healthy, the emergence of Henri Veesaar, etc. But it's going to take something special for the Heels to go from maybe a 5 seed all the way to a 3 seed. And something special could include a win in Cameron Indoor Stadium against the number 1 team in the country, or it could include the Heels winning the ACC tournament for the first time in a long time. That program doesn't go this long without an ACC tournament title very often. In fact, it's probably the longest drought that Heels fans have seen in our lifetimes. But it's unlikely to happen, but I think that seed factor that you threw out there is probably as big as anything else.
Kerry, Keating, if you're Hubert Davis, do you bring back Caleb Wilson for the game at Cameron? You know he loves the big stage. He wants to be there. He wants to have that opportunity, his only opportunity to play in Cameron Indoor Stadium. Or does Hubert Davis tell the young fella, hey, Caleb, let's hold you off and bring you back in Charlotte for the tournament?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I'm sure the competitor in Caleb wants to get out there and play. The coach should kind of take a 50-50 approach. David brought up an interesting point in that this could have implications past not just obtaining the double bye, which is valuable for the ACC tournament, but potentially bumping up a seed line to a 3. I think it's a great point and a valid one at that. It's almost like you work your way up to the 4-5 line and you're like, oh, man, because those ones are so strong. I mean, I remember being at UCLA when we were 2 and 3 seeds and never having to worry about that. It was the flip side. If we don't take care of business and we slide down to a 4, now we're a potential 1 seed that's getting really punishing our in a punitive sense by having to slide down and then play a 1 to get through that first weekend. And it's amazing how fast it happens because you go from 64 to 16 within 2 games. You know, forget about the first 4 garbage that happens now. It's a great question, Michael. I never really got clarity and didn't do enough research to find out if it was a boxer's fracture, exactly how much time he was going to need for that. But it sounds like it was in that family. So I would say the ACC tournament might be a little bit more important. And I'm not saying you're punting because you're playing in Cameron Indoor and they have venom, stored up to kind of spew out now because they lost their first game. But you've got to play the long game now. I think if you're Hubert, you feel like you put a season together where you found out some things about your team without Caleb. You clearly know what you're getting with Caleb, and not just in singularly, but as a team. I pointed out some of those hiding in plain sight defensive efficiencies that they have. DG brought back up the point that we made in the past where they also don't turn the ball over. They've got some pretty strong analytics that are going in their favor, that if they are shooting the ball well and Bogovac can build on a 6 for 10 night, 5 for 9 in the second half and be the professional shooter that he is, and Dixon matures in tournament play in Charlotte that carries over into the first round, I think the answer is you don't play him this weekend. I don't think you can risk 1 game at the expense of potentially 2 or 3 in Charlotte, and obviously maybe a run that can be pretty special. And let's face it, guys, I mean, we're not here to speculate on what is or what isn't in terms of the year-to-year changes that could come. But before this season started, this was more of a question, was this season going to be enough to make sure Hubert's here next season, right? Well, I think he's pretty much answered that. I think he only solidifies that going forward from a selfish standpoint and from a team standpoint. I think the answer is pretty easy. It'll be really interesting to see what that answer is come game time on Saturday, if in fact Caleb is suited up and able to play.
What's the key for Carolina defensively against the Blue Devils?
It really kind of starts on the offensive end, to be totally honest with you. It's something that they have done well. Don't turn the ball over. This is a team in Duke that's shooting 50% from the field and scoring 83 points a game. And a large part of that is because their defense is so good. Their defense leads to offense. So there's going to be the chess match in the game within the game right now. Can Cameron force Derek Dixon into some crazy freshman-like turnovers? Can it speed up Bogovac? Is Caleb back? Is Stevenson able to answer the North Carolina bell, being a local kid and fully aware of the heated nature of this rivalry? Carolina cannot turn the ball over in a live sense. Now, it's not that a good turnover is a dead ball turnover, but it's better than a live ball turnover. You can't let that turn into a run out, a dunk, an explosion. The Cameron crazies, they're all waving at you on the sideline. I mean, it's like all the things that come in the literally heated environment. The run starter in there is the live ball turnovers. Don't give Duke empty possessions. Take care of the ball. Make their crowd wait. I mean, it is really one thing. Like, look, I had I'll say good fortune because, heck, I respect the game to coach against Duke in Cameron with a team that won 26 games in that season at Santa Clara. And we were 2 buzzer beater shots away from being undefeated going into that season with Mason Plumlee and Rashid Suleiman. DG, you probably remember this. Unranked before the season started, ranked number 1 at the end of the season. Matter of fact, DJ, I wonder if you were even at this game before you got a chance to work together here. I brought our Santa Clara team in there because I knew we would have a pretty good team and be a good test. It almost became an undefeated matchup. We were up 4 with 17 minutes to go in the second half before a timeout occurred that be turned into a officials conference with Coach K that probably put them in the bonus about 5 minutes later and effectively ended the game. But my point being is we were able to take the crowd out of the game by controlling tempo on the offensive end, not to slow the game down, but by not turning the ball over. And we had some pretty good shooters on that team who were able to make shots with some patience. So it's almost impossible to take the crowd out of a Carolina Duke game. But if there's any element where they can kind of try to dwindle it down a little bit, got to take care of the ball, got to make sure you're getting a shot up. And as we pointed out in some of those early statistics, lean on the fact that your defense may be a little bit better than people realize and see if it can come to light in the most important time, which is this Saturday in Cameron.
Okay, David Glenn, the stock market's been good to the Wad Man so far here in 2026. What do I bet on Saturday night? Am I betting on Carolina for the upset? Am I betting on Duke for the blowout? Or is it something else, a third option that you would tell me as you look into your David Glenn crystal ball and look into this Battle of the Blues Part 2?
Yeah, I always use the phrase when it comes to gambling, don't bet the kids' college tuition fund. And that's in either direction. However, my answer on this particular game is bet on the Blue Devils. Now, the word blowout is kind of subjective. It wouldn't surprise me if Duke won by double digits. Do I think they'll do to Carolina what they did to NC State, what they did to Virginia, what they've done to most others over the last 2 months? Probably not, especially if Caleb Wilson does play. But I'll be very, very surprised if the Tar Heels go to Cameron and beat the Blue Devils.
Hey, Wolfpack Nation. You already know that when we talk about the great traditions of NC State athletics, Amedio's Italian Restaurant is right at the heart of it. Since 1963, it's been the go-to spot for generations of Pack fans. The walls tell the story, the food seals the deal, and every visit feels like part of the family. Whether it's pre-game pasta, post-game celebrations, or just a night out on Western Boulevard, Amedio's delivers every single time. Great people, great plates, and pure NC State pride. Stop by Amedio's, a true Wolfpack original.
In college sports, the teams that win aren't always the most talented. They're the most organized. They study the film, they build the game plan, and they execute with clarity and purpose. Your life works the same way. At Organize for Success, productivity expert Emily Parks helps busy leaders create championship-level systems for work, family, side projects, and everything in between. For more than a decade, she's coached clients to prioritize what matters most and eliminate the chaos that slows them down. If you're ready to run your life with the same precision as a top program, visit organizeforsuccess.com and set up your complimentary call. Organize for Success. Win the day.
Overtime right here on Time Out, the Tobacco Road Basketball Show. And this week, Overtime is presented by the original Saltworks. It's the best breakfast and lunch place in Wilmington. And speaking of salt, salty is the operative word for how people around college basketball feel about the prospect of currently undefeated 30-0 after that 2-point Tuesday night win over Toledo. The Red Hawks are 30-0, but they supposedly, according to Bruce Pearl, Mr. Ethics, need to win the Mid-American Conference tournament to make the field of 68. Now, the Mid-American Conference, I spent 5 years in the MAC at the University of Akron. It's rarely a two-bid league. The last time the Mid-American got 2 NCAA men's basketball tournament bids was back in Prince's famous year of 1999. And Kent State got the auto bid. Miami, Ohio got the in with the at-large. And here we are again, an undefeated 30-0 Red Hawks team by Travis Steele, my good friend. And the conversation is still, are they safe? Now, another layer to this, guys, is despite being undefeated, Miami is not even the highest ranked team out of the MAC in the Ken Pom. That would go to my former 5-year employer, Go Zips. Right now, they are ranked number 61. Miami is number 86 in the Ken Pom. So the debate right now becomes, does Miami make the tournament or do they not? Keats, you've been a mid-major coach at Santa Clara. Does the MAC deserve that second bid this year?
Well, this is going to be the topic of every Selection Sunday show and preempting show, mostly because they haven't lost yet. But when you peel back the layers and realize they're really not 30-0 right now by committee standards, they're 27-0 because 3 of those wins are against non-Division I teams. And the only reason I bring that up, and I get all that part of it, we had to deal with that at almost every stop they're at. I think it's because you're faced with a Big Ten that doesn't have to play MAC teams. If you had substituted 3 of the lower Big Ten teams out for 3 of those non-Division I wins and they had beaten them, I don't think that this is even a question, because I think their metrics would increase based on the fact of the assimilation of those 3 Big Ten teams. You know, they've only had the benefit of playing Akron once as well. I mean, it's such a large league with 2 different divisions. They don't even have the chance to play the next best team in their league twice and gain the advantage of whatever ranking bump they would get. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the committee does. Look, be that as it may, I've been on that side. Hey, we're winning our games. What more do you want us to do? There's only so much we can do. Did you really make that effort to have the best schedule? That's, I think, going to be the biggest sticking point. I think if you hear the interview after the selection show and they're on the snub list, I guarantee you the thing that will be brought up is that they played 3 non-Division I games. It used to be a big topic back when, and they tried to limit those in some of those mid-major leagues. And the guy said, well, what do you want us to do? We're trying to play other teams. They won't play us. And in this day and age where super conferences are taking over all the majority of those large conference school games, I think it's the only thing that would keep them out is the fact that they did that and didn't play Akron twice, unless, of course, they face them and it's a non-starter if they win the conference tournament. If they lose to Akron in the conference final, I think you're going to have some people sweating it out up there in Ohio. But I do think at this point they deserve it. The problem is their numbers don't show that, and we're all driven by analytics and numbers. It's an easy bailout right now. I think it's going to be a fascinating follow and a fascinating story that I have a bad feeling it's not going to end well, unless, of course, they take all the drama out and are able to win their conference tournament.
And David Glenn, the drama could continue on because how does this whole Miami, Ohio argument, do they make it, do they not, push forward the idea that a lot of people have right now around college basketball that the NCAA tournament field of 68 needs to expand?
I personally wish that the debate about the expansion of the NCAA tournament was really about what's right, what's fair, what's just, what's equitable, what's smart. The reality is, in college athletics, these decisions are made mostly about money. And they're going to get more money if they expand the tournament, and that's going to be the bottom line. But if we want to have a discussion about fairness, I mean, I still like the tournament the size that it is. I'm not in favor of it. But I do want to remind folks of a couple things. Number one, it is not an NCAA rule that conferences use their automatic bid for the tournament champion. That is not a rule. You as a league could determine, and I hear the ghost of my old friend Dean Smith in my ear. How many times did Coach Smith say that it was a greater accomplishment to win your regular season title than your tournament title? Why? And his logic was sound to me, because your performance, I can hear his nasally voice explaining it to me when I was 20 years old. Well, David, your performance over 2+ months says more about you than your performance over 3 or 4 days, right? And yeah, of course he's right when he said that. And there's a lot of merit to that. All 31 conferences choose to give their automatic bid to the tournament champion. It's part of what makes March Madness, right? The tournament is not just that 68-team monstrosity. It's these tournaments that go conference by conference. So until they started chopping the bottom teams out of each league and they aren't invited to the tournament anymore, it used to be the true all 360 plus teams come early March had an avenue to get to the big dance, right? If you finished last in your league, you still had a chance to win your conference tournament to get that automatic bid. We don't quite have that sort of that perfect state of affairs right now because, again, not all teams make their conference tournaments. But the last thing I'll say about this, I admire the heck out of anybody that can go 30-0, period. Full stop. I admire it. I applaud it. I'm impressed. It is true what Coach Keating said. Your non-conference schedule would be scrutinized. And in the end, nobody that Miami of Ohio voluntarily put on its schedule, meaning the non-conference, ranked in the top 150 teams in KenPom. There's only 360-some teams. They didn't schedule anybody in the top 150. And in fact, the only MAC team that's on their schedule that's in the top, I think, 130 or 140 is Akron. So you've gone 30-0 against one of the top 140 teams in college basketball. Is it a great accomplishment? Heck yeah, man. I've played on teams as a young athlete where I knew we were the best team in the league. I knew if we played our best, we'd win every game. Did we finish undefeated? No. Why? Because the human element makes it hard to be at your best 30 straight times. So again, on the one hand, I applaud the accomplishment. I imagine it'll be either Akron or Miami, Ohio that earns that bid. But I will personally be surprised if the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee makes the MAC a 2-bid league because, they're the 17th rated league out of 31 in America. And you don't get 2 bids if you're a below average conference, even if somebody goes 30-0 and then loses in the conference tournament. I don't think it's going to happen. Miami, Ohio has a chance to, as Coach said, make all this discussion a moot point. Go ahead and win your league tournament, and then we don't have to worry about whether or not you get in.
Fun fact, you will love this one. Do you know the special little story about the Akron, Miami, Ohio rivalry in last year's MAC championship game? It was won by John Gross, who's the head coach at Akron, and his stepbrother is Travis Steele, the head coach of Miami, Ohio. So this one's going to come out wide. And I'm telling you right now, Travis wants Big Bro in the worst way on the biggest stage, and we'd love to stick it to him right there. So before we get out of here, we have two more quick things that I want to get out here on Timeout, the Tobacco Road Basketball Show. And first up, Jeff Goodman, the big-time Field of 68. Jeff Goodman, the big-time college basketball reporter nationally, reporting now that Wake Forest is going to bring back Steve Forbes for another season. The Demon Deacons, after their loss on Tuesday night to Virginia, now 15-15 overall, 6-11 in the ACC. Coach Kerry Keating, you've been on the bench at Wake Forest with Dave Odom. Quick hit. What does continuity with Forbes mean for that Demon Deacon program and Wake's roster building and identity heading into next season?
It stabilizes the roster and obviously the pitch, right? And in this climate, they want to know because it changes. Players want to know, and it's a year-to-year deal now. I don't know what the parameters of what they've agreed on and whether it's a year-to-year or multi-year or if it's just going to be one more. But obviously, if Steve's staying, now they can go out and recruit. Portal season is pretty much effectively started. It'll be official right after the Final Four. They can retain with clarity, which is obviously priority number one, with Drew Harris being on the chopping block, if you will, for everyone else to come down and cut down and try to take from under his feet. But hopefully they can build around that, get some more players in there. Don't lose a full season with uncertainty. And don't go through the whole charade of going to the ACC tournament with the dead man walking. So it's not everything, but it's a starting point that you can kind of give yourself one last shot at a roster and hope that their GM has a chance to kind of supercharge the offseason, go out and spend some money, and stabilize the fact that you have a chance to have a great year next year. The parameters of which we won't know until John comes out, but if so, I think it's a good day to be a Demon Deacon because I think Steve deserves that. I hope that he can stabilize his operations and his roster, give himself a better chance to get over that proverbial hump. Granted, they don't make it this year in the ACC tournament with a magical run, but get over that hump and make a tournament run next year, and then it all becomes a moot point, and it's a matter of how long he's going to stay for.
You know, David, Steve Forbes' best friend right now might be Jake Dickert because with the Demon Deacons doing well in football, that's taken a little bit of the heat off the basketball program and athletics director John Curry. What does it say about Wake and the ACC that this is the decision to keep building under Steve Forbes instead of resetting with a new coach?
Well, Mike, while I appreciate your reference to Jake Dickert, Steve Forbes' best friend is Mitch Shaw, the deep-pocketed booster whose name is on some of the Wake Forest basketball facilities and who will be leaned upon for name, image, likeness purposes and otherwise. I'll say this. I looked it up. Since the NCAA tournament expanded in the mid-'80s, so 40-ish years ago, there have only been 3 coaches retained after starting their first 6 years at an ACC school and going 0 for 6 in NCAA tournaments. One was a guy named Jim Christian at Boston College. In my opinion, BC hasn't cared much about basketball, has fallen behind the times financially. They gave Jim Christian another year because they weren't sure what the heck they were going to do otherwise. Jim Christian lost again, and he lost his job after year 7. Prior to Steve Forbes, the only other example in 40-plus years of ACC history of a guy starting his tenure with 6 straight misses but being retained was Leonard Hamilton at Florida State. And that story ended well because Florida State won an ACC title. Florida State sent a bunch of dudes to the NBA. Leonard Hamilton's, the equivalent of a jersey, is hanging in the rafters in Tallahassee because they were patient with Leonard Hamilton. One difference was Jim Christian's teams were almost entirely just bad. Leonard Hamilton's teams, even though he was 0 for 6 in the NCAA tournament, making the big dance, they were making the NIT every year. They had good records almost every year. Steve Forbes similarly had 4 good teams in between his really bad first team, and we told people since last summer that this year was going to be his second worst team, and it was. That didn't surprise us. It was just not a well-constructed roster, not nearly as talented as some of his others. So this is a reflection that we're in year 1 of the revenue sharing world. This is a reflection that Wake believes it can buy a basketball team so that a coach who's already shown he's good, both at East Tennessee, junior college ranks, but also getting the Deacs to the point where they were one of the last teams out and had some fun teams to watch 2 and 3 years ago, especially. They believe in this new environment. It's worth being patient for one more year. And they probably aren't sure in this wild, wild west of college basketball that if they did make a change, who are they going to get that they definitely like more than they like Steve Forbes? That's not an easy question. Wake's a smaller private university surrounded by some heavyweights in Duke and Carolina and others. It's speculative whom John Curry would have been able to hire. And by the way, we're never going to get those contract details because Wake is a private university. Sometimes they tell you the length of the contract, but they never publicly disclose the dollars.
And you and I were standing next to Mitch Shaw during the NC State Wake Forest football game down at a Legacy Stadium back in September. So he is by far and away the all-time super fan when it comes to Wake Forest basketball. Of course, Bob McCreary has that role for the football team. Now, DG, the Deacs aren't going to make the NCAA tournament, but the ACC is projecting at least 7 and possibly as many as 10 NCAA tournament teams this year. That's a huge improvement over the recent campaigns for the Atlantic Coast Conference. What's driving that improvement?
I think it starts with talent. There are other factors, but how do you accumulate talent? One is the old-fashioned high school recruiting trail. The Atlantic Coast Conference this year signed freshman Cameron Boozer of Duke, National Player of the Year. Freshman Caleb Wilson of North Carolina. He's going to be on the All-American teams. Freshman Tess DeRitter of Virginia. He'll be on the All-ACC team somewhere. Freshman Abuka Okori of Stanford. Freshman Michael Brown Jr. of Louisville. Freshman Chance Mallory of Virginia. And I could go on and on. What's another pipeline? The international pipeline is different, as we've discussed on previous shows. In the old days, pre-revenue sharing and name, image, likeness, if a guy wanted to come from Europe to the United States, he probably transferred here for the end of his high school years and then jumped into college basketball. Nowadays, you could be making good money as a European pro in your early 20s, and the new world of American college basketball makes a lot more guys say, that might not be a bad idea. What league did better in the international recruiting circuit than Virginia getting its best player, Tess DeRitter, from the nation of Belgium, right? I mean, their starting center at UVA is Johan Grunloh from Germany. And that list goes on and on and on. There are great international players. We just saw Luka Bogovac lift UNC past the Clemson Tigers on Seth Trimble's senior night. Wouldn't have happened without Bogovac, who's from Montenegro and was a star in the Adriatic League last year. That list continues. Sananda Fru is the starting center at Louisville and a good player, I believe, from Germany as well. If you see an ACC contender, with the exception of the Clemson Tigers, there is at least one international player in the top 7 or 8 at every other contender. So if you're signing some of the best freshmen to enter college basketball, many of them, and you're signing many of the best international guys entering college basketball, and meanwhile, you had that coaching turnover, and now those guys are getting better, right? John Scheyer and Hubert Davis and others, and Ryan Odom has a great first-year splash at UVA. Jay Lucas has a first-year splash at Miami. That's why I said there's multiple factors, but I just think it's intelligent use of those talent pipelines, freshmen, international, and obviously every one of these teams that is good also has been using the transfer portal wisely to one degree or another.
That's a great point, David. And Keats, you're from the sideline. David's from press row. I'm from the AD suite. And when you look at the sidelines, man, the ACC lost a lot of talent over the last 5 years from those sidelines. Coach K, Roy Williams. But it looks like right now the young bloods in this league can coach, and that has to bode well for the Atlantic Coast Conference, not only this year, but in the many years to come, seeing that incitement, that energy back in ACC basketball.
Well, the thing that they've done well, and you look at the top of the league right now, and three extremely young coaches, obviously in John Scheyer, Jay Lucas, and Ryan Odom, they've assimilated themselves to the modern player, and they've also embraced the modern way of building rosters. This was something that we saw, fundamentally change a lot of older coaches, and I still think it's going to happen with three or four guys nationally that we may not expect just to hang it up because it wasn't what they were raised on and how they want to build their team and their program in this year-to-year march of spending money to pay them and then treat them as professionals. Just a totally different mindset. You look at the top right now in those three teams in Duke, Virginia, and Miami. You have guys that were raised basically with and in this generation. They're younger coaches. They're not too far removed from some of the kids that are playing right now. There are some guys playing that are within 9 years of these guys' ages right now. There are guys in their mid-20s that are playing, and you're talking about three coaches that are, I don't even know if they're all in their mid-30s yet, right? So it's a very young set right now, but they're also have the pedigree. Obviously, Ryan with his dad, Dave, the Virginia Wake Forest lineage, he's done well at all the stops that he's made, and made them pretty quickly too, and kind of made a point to almost put himself inadvertently in this transfer from one school to the other. I don't know if he's been at a school more than 3 years. VCU, Utah State, what was it? Towson? It's not Towson. What was it? UMBC. I mean, he hasn't been anywhere. He's like the modern day transfer portal coach, right? John Scheyer groomed to take over, as David said, maybe the most successful guy so far to take over for the guy. You always wanted, be the second guy, not the buffer. He's debunked that. And, Jay taking over for Jim Larinaga, who moved down from George Mason, was a stalwart in this league for many, many years and obviously did a great job in Miami. So their transitions have been smooth, and I think it bodes well for the leadership. The question is, will they stay there? And I still think we're going to get into a situation where you're going to have some coaches at Power Four schools leaving after a year or two to kind of elevate maybe their own financial situation and go to other schools and other Power Fours, let alone their own conference. Now the question remains, well, how long will these guys be there to carry the torch at those schools now at the top of the ACC in the current standings?
We are closing in on March Madness and our third annual Bacon and Basketball Bracket Contest here on the North Carolina Sports Network. We want to welcome Stitch Golf to an enhanced partnership here on the North Carolina Sports Network, as they will be donating some great prizes, not only for players in the game, but also for some other contests coming up during the month of March. So welcome to Stitch Golf, who is signed on as our title presenting sponsor of our ACC tournament coverage coming up from Charlotte. So as we get ready to make that trek to the Queen City next week, it's time now for our final word this week here on Timeout. David Glenn, you're the veteran. Why don't you lead off with your final word for this edition of Timeout?
Well, y'all know this is my favorite time of year and my favorite sport, and I love looking at things, of course, here on the North Carolina Sports Network from a North Carolina perspective, meaning the bold North State, as Mike likes to call it. All time, the greatest we've ever done as a state in terms of the number of NCAA tournament participants is 6. We know Duke will be there as a number 1 seed. We know Carolina will be there as a fairly high seed. We know NC State's going to be there. So we're at 3. Just remember, UNC Wilmington just won the regular season title in the Coastal Athletic Association. The Seahawks will be the number 1 seed at the CAA tournament. Got to win that tournament to punch your ticket, but the Seahawks are a candidate to make it for, in their case, what would be a second year in a row. Also remember, High Point has already won the Big South Conference regular season. They will be, the Panthers, the number 1 seed at that league's tournament. Got to win the tournament to punch your ticket. In their case, last year was the first ever NCAA tournament bid for High Point. They have a chance to make it 2 years in a row, this time under their new head coach, Flynn Clayman, after Alan Huss left for Creighton last year. So that if both of those favorites won, that would get us to 5. And we'll have plenty of time to talk about these details on future shows. But remember, App State finished second in the Sun Belt Conference. So the Mountaineers have a chance to punch their ticket via the automatic bid at the Sun Belt Tournament. And there are others, the Charlotte 49ers in the American Athletic Conference, NC Central in the MEAC tournament. Queens University in Charlotte is one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the Atlantic Sun. And there are others. Now, I don't expect us to get beyond 6, but my last word is that if we can get 6 again and tie our all-time record as a state, that will make what's already going to be a fun month for us here at the North Carolina Sports Network even more fun.
And I do want to give a shout out to Fayetteville State, the men's basketball team, the Broncos winning the CIAA. That's a Division II league, but they're going to the big dance. And Winston-Salem State's women's basketball team, the Ramleys, celebrating because they win the CIAA women's tournament and they are headed to the postseason as well. Well, Keats, it's time to wrap this edition of Timeout up. We'll give you the final word this week.
It's March, guys. March Madness is upon us. We're going to get a great taste of it in Charlotte this coming weekend, which proves to be a great ACC tournament and a great precursor to a 3-week run in March Madness ending in April. Out in Indianapolis. I think you're going to find out that March, especially in this year, and maybe the most volatile of rosters. David mentioned, I think, maybe one player, Seth Trimble, that started and finished his career in the ACC. I think there's or 3. I think there's one in the SEC. There's one player, I think, in the SEC that started. So I don't know what the other numbers are. So the volatility is real. I think March isn't going to reward who looks good. I think you're going to see some fairly weird looking basketball early on, maybe some crazy upsets because you have some loaded rosters by way of the transfer portal. It's really going to reward teams that are connected. You're seeing that with Duke right now. That is a connected team and program from A to Z, and how they go about it, how they play, how they operate, how Will Wade said they run to the scorer's table. They have connectivity going at the highest level. That's why they're the number 1 and odds-on favorite probably to cut the nets down in Indianapolis. They're the standard. Carolina's got momentum, but it's going to have to travel. Everyone else, now your season comes down to the one question. Can you defend? Can you rebound? Can you execute when things get loud and possessions get tight? It's March basketball, guys. It's going to find out what guys are made of. It's going to bode for a fun 3 or 4 weeks coming up here as we tune in on the Bold North State and the NCSN.
This is the North Carolina Sports Network. From the high country to the Outer Banks, on courts, fields, and fairways, we tell the stories of the Bold North State. Follow us on social media at the NC Sports Net. We're the exclusive home of The David Glenn Show, coach-driven analysis of football and basketball. A look at the past with This Was Then. Inside NIL with Court Vision, the North Carolina Sports Awards, aka the Pineys, and the Old North State Tailgate, where we are on the ground at North Carolina's top events. Our foundational partner is NC Pork, raising the bacon, raising the bar. Telling the stories of the Bold North State. Experience matters. This is NCSN, the North Carolina Sports Network.